My name is Guni Sharon. I'm an assistant professor at Texas A&M. And I came here to give an AI seminar talk, and I was told this is a general AI seminar, so I picked a general AI topic. Hopefully, most of you can relate to it on some level. And this would be exploring in sparse-reward domains, which is, well, an issue in many real-world applications. So can I just start, right?
Go on ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So the layout for today's talk, I'll start by giving a quick introduction to the explore-exploit trade-off problem. I'll quickly describe common exploration strategies. Should be known for most of you, but I'll just quickly go over those so that we'll all be on the same level. Then I'll show through an example challenges that are presented by sparse-reward domains. And finally, hopefully quicker, I'll, as quickly as possible, try to get to my group's contributions regarding curious exploration to handle this trade-off, the explore-exploit trade-off. And then also I'll discuss some of our work on leveraging guidance or demonstrations to guide the exploration towards such sparse rewards. Now, we don't have to go over all of the slides. I'd actually prefer to have a discussion. If something's come up, please stop me, and we can. I'm happy to discuss several of these ideas and topics, and we'll get to wherever we'll get. That's fine. So to present the issue, let's say I would ask you, okay, where should I have lunch? Levi, where should I have lunch? Opa or the new unranked mystery truck? Okay, so I might be nagging. Yeah, okay. I'll leave him alone. So, right, I might ask you where I would like to eat lunch. We can go with something seems to be okay-ish, right? An okay-ish place. Or I can go with something that I don't know yet, some new food truck on campus. And if I'll ask you that, then you'll ask me, well, I need more details. Are you going to repeat this decision process over and over again? Are you interested in having a decent lunch today, and you don't really care about the future rewards from making the same decision? So there are several factors that come into play here, right? Gaining new knowledge or exploiting knowledge that we already have. And this is exactly the explore-exploit dilemma. It's a fundamental problem in reinforcement learning, also in bandit problems, where an agent must decide between exploration. This would be trying new actions to discover their effect and potentially uncovering more rewarding strategies, or exploit, that would be leveraging known actions to yield high rewards based on past experience. And so, of course, at the end of the day, we need to balance these two decisions. We need to sometimes explore and sometimes exploit. Usually we try to balance between short-term gains and long-term gains. So, of course, exploration will allow you to build towards higher future gains, while exploitation will provide higher shorter gains, usually. In most cases, we don't make a single decision and go with that. We do what's called a dynamic adjustment. Usually at the beginning, we try to explore and gain more knowledge. So at the beginning of the learning period, we exploit more, and over time we explore more, and over time we try to converge on exploiting. The objectives of a good exploration strategy would be to do, first of all, efficient learning. This is crucial for efficient and effective learning in dynamic environments. And eventually, we would like to converge on the optimal policy, on optimal performance. And this, in many cases, it depends on the environment, but in most cases, it involves continuously evaluating and adjusting the exploit decision. So revisiting our exploration strategy or adjusting it over time. Okay, next, I'm going to discuss several common exploration strategies, just that we'll get a feeling of how these might work, what would be a good exploration strategy. So these are the commonly used exploration strategies. So I'll discuss those with a short example. For instance, epsilon greedy would be with some probability, 1 minus epsilon. So I added another option. Now we can go to Marco's famous burgers. It has a higher score. Hopefully that's the case. I'm going with the Google score. So an epsilon greedy approach would be with a probability of 1 minus epsilon, we'll go to the best known option that we know based on our current knowledge. And with probability epsilon, we'll just randomly pick with uniform distribution over all of our options. Next, we have a softmax or a Boltzmann exploration. This is also a sampling-based exploration. We have to sample some distribution. This is a bit more sophisticated. Here, I'm sure most of you know of a softmax activation function, right? We take all of the scores and we give them as input to the softmax function, and it produces a distribution. Okay, and then we sample the distribution, and that's the action that we're going to choose. The softmax or Boltzmann exploration, of course, provide a distribution that has higher probability to actions with higher expected reward. These are also known as Q values, but that means the expected reward. In this case, it will just be the number of stars that each option here gets. So these two are examples of sampling-based exploration or random exploration approaches. We also have other types of exploration approaches. For instance, exploration approaches that try to also take into account the uncertainty in our current estimation of the expected reward from each one of the actions. So for instance, Marco's still has the highest score, but you can see that the score is pretty much, it's based on 79 samples. So it's pretty solid, you might say, while the OPA, it has a lower score, but less sampling. In this case, it only has seven samples. So you might say, well, it has a lower score, but this is less of a certain score. So that might be something that usually we would like to take into consideration. And of course, our mystery truck has no samples at all, so all bets are off there. So these exploration strategies that also take into account the uncertainty will try to provide some bonus to the expected reward, to the expected return, that is based on the uncertainty level. So again, it will give a higher bonus to the mystery truck compared to Marco's in this case. And then we do a deterministic selection, usually, right? So given the adjusted scores, the score that we know of plus the uncertainty bonus, we'll choose deterministically which action to take. And then finally, I'm not sure, I mean, some would argue that this is not really an exploration strategy. I would say, for the sake of this discussion, it is. There is the notion of optimistic initialization. And this is also a greedy exploration strategy. That is, it's not random in this case. And the idea here is that for any unknown action, you assign the maximum possible expected return out of any possible outcome that you might get. And this, you know what, I'll show you an example in a second, how this will work, but in general, I'll just say this will guarantee that you will try each one of the actions at least once. And under some conditions, maybe more than that. Yes?
Are you assuming that everywhere
So that's a good question, but we'll get to that later on. We'll discuss also tabular versus approximation later on. Okay, so in general, we'll consider the sampling-based approaches. I wrote here eta s instead of pi, just to differentiate between the policy we are converging on and the exploration strategy, okay? So in many cases, these are not the same. They are both policies in some sense, but in many cases, there are different policies. So for sampling-based approaches, like as the Boltzmann exploration or epsilon greedy, we define some distribution. In many cases, most cases, this is based on the Q values, on the expected return. And we sample our action from that distribution. Uncertainty-based exploration, such as, well, you all know, hopefully, about the upper confidence bound, or UCB. That's an example of that. These are deterministic exploration, so we know that it's a deterministic process of choosing the action. But now, we don't only take the Q value into consideration, but we also add some uncertainty bonus. And it's not only UCB, you have also other approaches that do the same. And for optimistic initialization, as I said before, if I have two actions, I initially assume that each one will provide the highest return. Then I choose one of them. And of course, in any case, the expected return the updated expected return will go down. Okay, so that over time will guarantee that I try each one of the actions, because unseen actions seems most promising, right? So actually, optimistic initialization is pretty effective, but it has some issues in stochastic environment. Well, once we add uncertainty, it's not great. But if you go to the Sutton and Burton book, you'll actually see some nice argument or nice results just for optimistic initialization. It is a good approach, but it has some limitations which are important to know about. And I'll show you some results later on. And we'll see where it works very well and when it starts to not work very well. Okay, so with respect to properties of exploration strategies, I would like to present several of these because this will help us do some I guess, theoretical analysis or differentiate between the different approaches. So some properties that I would like to discuss is, first of all, coverage at the limit, meaning that if I'll repeat the decision process over and over and over again, at some point or eventually I will visit all of the states in action in my space. Okay, so the probability of not visiting a given state of action, in action, will diminish to 0 over time. And so hopefully you understand why this is a very important property, because if you don't have that property, then it's a no-go. Then you can't provide any guarantees about optimalities. You might just not see the optimal action, right? If you don't cover the entire state and action space. Next, we have a very important property, which is infinite often visitation. This property means that at infinity, not only will I visit each state and action pair, but that I will visit an infinite number of times each state and action pair. And this is a very important property for many RL reinforcement learning algorithms to guarantee convergence to the optimal solution. But we won't go into the technical details. I'll just say that this is a very important property. And of course, if you have property number 2, the infinite often visitation, you also have property number 1, obviously. Property number 3 would be visitation tracking. This is usually important for those exploration strategies that try to assess the uncertainty for each state and action Q value or expected return. This is important. So, as I said, this is specifically important for those exploration strategies that try to assess the uncertainty. But as was discussed a second ago, these are usually restricted to tabular settings, where you can actually store some information regarding each state and action that you visited. And this is actually a very limiting property. So this is property number 3 is bad, while 1 and 2 are good. And finally, we have property number 4, which is curiosity-driven exploration. This is a bit harder to define, so it's a bit ambiguous in many papers. Many exploration strategies or many papers claim to be curious exploration, while curious exploration is not well defined. So we try, in our work, we try to define it, but we try to give the most specific definition for curiosity while still including all of the work that claims to be curious. And so we came up with the following definition, saying that action visitation, the precedence of action visitation, what is precedence? Well, in non-deterministic, in sampling-based, sampling-based exploration, we can't say that it will always be chosen. So we say some kind of a precedence. It can be related to probability, or in a hard mass, just to the to taking a specific action. But we say that the precedence is inversely correlated in expectation in order to cover those sampling-based approaches with the number of times that that action was visited previously. So, okay, so in essence here, yes?
So is number 4 something we always want?
Not necessarily, right? Not necessarily, but many papers, so no proofs there, but many papers say, hey, you want curiosity or curiosity helps. But this is, as I said, there's a lot of ambiguity there, okay? So in essence, this means that, or curiosity-driven exploration means that you would like or you prefer visiting state and actions that you didn't see before or you saw less times previously, okay? And that's where the name is from, curiosity. Okay, so next, let's discuss some challenges that are presented by sparse-reward domains, and then I'll go back to discussing these properties with respect to our proposed exploration approach. Okay, so in sparse-reward domains, the rewards signal is rarely observed, or it's not often observed, right? And this is very important in order to allow us to converge on the optimal policy. We need to see some kind of rewards. Moreover, it might require a very specific sequence of actions in order to actually observe the reward. For instance, if your robot requires to cross a very long and narrow bridge, okay, so you have to follow a very specific set of actions in order to reach the end of the bridge. So by the way, Matt, this is also AI. Another example would be the robotic grasper, right? So if you need to carry an object from one point to a faraway different point, and you have an action that is just drop, so you have to have a very specific set of actions which is hold for all of the path in order to be successful in your objective. So let's revisit the exploration strategies that we discussed before. So for instance, those random exploration strategies, for instance, epsilon greedy or Boltzmann. And let's say we only have 2 actions here and there is a probability. And we have, okay, so we have these soft policies, random exploration, and the probability of moving right is some probability p, and we only have 2 actions, and there's a 1 minus p probability of falling off the bridge. So the question is, what is the probability of discovering the reward? That is, getting all the way to the end of the bridge. What is the order of that probability? How does it grow? Or how does it shrink, actually? You have to, it shrinks, right. So it shrinks exponentially with the length of the bridge, right? You see that? So the probability of actually reaching the goal is P over, well, the length of the bridge. So you can see why that might be an issue. And that might be an issue with random exploration, where if you have a long sequence of very specific tasks that you need to do, random exploration will have an exponentially decaying probability of actually observing the goal eventually. Okay, let's look at a different approach, UCB. This is an exploration strategy that is based on estimating the uncertainty. So for those of you who know or have some experience with UCB, will UCB be effective in discovering the reward here? Do I need to point at people? Just guess. Yes, but you can also use it over a sequential decision process, right? Not necessarily. You can have a specific value for each state and action pair. Okay, for instance. Sorry? It will, yes, I agree. So UCB will be effective here. I'll show you some results soon. However, as we discussed previously, UCB has some issue in scaling beyond tabular settings. Okay, there are some techniques, approximation techniques, but they have their own issues. We'll discuss that later. What about optimistic initialization? Yes? But I'm looking for a yes, but. Okay? So yes is good. When might it not work well? I'll give you the answer. So in stochastic domain, that might be a problem. So you're trying an action, and, well, you slipped and fell. In those cases, optimistic initialization will block your path to the actual goal, depending on your learning rate and stuff like that, right? So it's depending on transition uncertainty and also the learning rate. If it's low enough, then it's also, if it's small, the learning rate is small enough, it can also be fine. Okay, let's move on to one of my group's paper. So a specific exploration strategy, we denoted continual optimistic initialization, or COIN for short. So I'm giving you the pseudocode, but don't try to read the pseudocode, right? I know that that's a sure way to lose the audience. I'll just give you the high level of the pseudocode, right? So we do greedy exploration, right? So no sampling. And then we do Q-learning, so just trying to keep an average of the rewards that we saw so far. Q-learning involves some propagation, but don't worry too much about that. And then every so often, every appropriate steps, I'll discuss that soon, we revise the Q values. We update the Q values to be optimistic. We do it every several steps. And so we have a specific bonus to the Q value, some uncertainty bonus, and we add that to all of the Q values currently. Okay, so how will that work? I'll go into the details in a second. Yeah. Yes, it is the same for all of the actions, and I'll show you the formula in a second. Okay, but no, it has to be that way. I mean, okay, we'll discuss it in a second. Okay, so how will that work? So say our robot has 3 different possible actions, and currently, based on our current knowledge, action 1 is the best action. So our exploration strategy is just follow argmax q. So we'll continually take the best action that we know of at the moment, which will be A1. But then we'll do a coin iteration and we'll add some bonus values to the same bonus value to all of the actions. So we're making all of the actions optimistic or more optimistic. Again, we will choose action number 1, but once we choose action number 1, we'll update the Q value downwards. Right? And at this point, action number 2 might look more beneficial. We'll try it, and actually we'll find that it has higher reward. And now, if we just continue, we'll always choose action number 2, up to the point where we do another coin iteration. We'll add some bonus value to all of the actions, and we'll update the Q value for action number 2 downwards until action number 3 is better one, and we will explore action number 3 eventually, and we might find that it actually has a higher return. Okay, so a very simple process. There are some questions, which is what would be an appropriate B addition step? So in our paper, at least, we set the appropriate step as the time step or the training step at which the maximum temporal different error, so the amount of update that we do to the Q values along the greedy trajectory, the trajectory that we are exploring, becomes small enough. That is, we say, okay, for the policy that we're currently following, the greedy policy, which is also the exploration policy in our case, that we are currently following, we're not learning anything new already. We converge on the values. So we do the update step. We add the bonus value. What is the bonus value? So in our paper, we just set it as the maximum difference between the maximum Q that we see along the greedy trajectory and the minimum Q that we see for a specific state in the greedy trajectory. So this is a difference for a specific state. The reason we choose this difference as our bonus value is because it has some nice theoretical guarantees regarding making all of the actions optimistic, at least along the greedy trajectory. But this is not very important. Actually, you can choose any other B. You can have a very small B, and that's fine. It will work, right? This is not very important. The first one, the appropriate B addition step, is more important. If you make it too small, it won't guarantee infinite often visitations, for instance. But the value of B, that's less crucial. So now we can compare the different exploration strategies with respect to the properties that we previously discussed. So coverage, actually, all of them have, except optimistic initialization in some cases. Optimistic initialization in stochastic domains might not cover the entire space. Infinite open visitation, well, all of these have except optimistic initialization. Curiosity, as we defined it, all of these algorithms have except epsilon greedy. And finally, UCB does require visitation tracking, which is a limiting factor in very large state spaces, right? Specifically beyond tabular settings. And I know what, okay, yeah.
I don't want to critique you about it, but when you go back to your pseudocode, you can go into the definition of the bond, but it works both ways here. You're doing on max over all states. So are you sweep? When you get to the time step, are you going to sweep over all?
No. It's just along the greedy trajectory, right? So I'm running my regular Q-learning algorithm, and I'm just, while running the Q-learning algorithm, I keep track of the minimal updates that I did along, well, it's the greedy trajectory because that's my exploration policy. Okay, yeah?
So is it decaying over time, or just do it for
The B? So the results that I'm showing you is not decaying over time. Well, so no, the results that I'm showing in the vanilla setting, it's not decaying over time. The B value?
No, the adding process, how many iterations do you do it?
No, so we didn't set that to decay over time, but you have to do that in order to guarantee what's called bounded regret.
Okay, so the number of iterations, how do you define the number of iterations to do this process? So you can't do it entire train.
What's the stopping condition?
Yes.
Right, so we didn't set that, and I can show you that in the results. Technically, your question is correct if you would like to eventually converge, right? You can't continuing doing that. We didn't discuss that. Actually, in the paper, we just said, yeah, that's possible. Specifically, you can decay it exponentially. Like, when do you do that? When do you do these updates? And then you can also bound your regret. But we just said that in generally, because we wanted to show our convergence guarantees in the empirical evaluation section. We just want to show how fast can we reach an optimal solution. Right? Technically, you can say, okay, if I know that, I can stop there. But we didn't go into decaying strategies.
So I'm saying this because based on the visitation,
Mm-hmm.
you saw for which is safe. This is safe with a certain number of times. You can stop adding process to it because you're sure that this action is good for us, the optimal action. It's like what is being done in UCB.
Right.
It's not really-
Right. So yes, I'll just conclude by saying it can be done by decaying the iterations where you actually do that update. But we didn't explore that. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So in the table that you have, keeping track of the number of states visited is bad. And it's bad because it doesn't scale.
Yes. And I'm saying, well, go on your Q table and add stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good question.
I got the point, like, how do you document initialization with function?
Right. It's a good question. And it will be, wait, 2 slides. Yeah.
When you add the device, the frequency at which you do that is the hyperparameter.
The frequency, no. So we had a simple rule. We just say once you converged along the greedy trajectory. Technically, yes, we should have said, hey, you know, I mean, maybe in another paper we'll just say, you know, let's track that we're not improving anymore over time, right? Between iterations, and we can decay that. We didn't do that because our paper we try to be more on the conceptual level, just showing, hey, you know, this is a good idea and it can be much more effective in many cases. Okay, so let's quickly look at some results. Let me at least finish this portion of the talk. So we have till 12:45. Sorry.
12 to 1, yeah.
To 1, right, but we want to do questions. Okay. We'll continue. Yeah, we'll do the questions in line as we go. Okay, so let's look at some results. So these results are for a specific domain that we designed just to show these the same bridge crossing domain, where you have to follow a specific set of actions in order to reach the goal. But in order to make it a bit more interesting, we also added a suboptimal goal to add a local optimum, right? So we have a suboptimal goal that is close to the starting location. You just go left and you find it. I think that will provide you like 10, a reward of 10. But if you go all the way to the other side of the bridge, you get a reward of 30. Yeah. Okay, so now let's look. We set a very long bridge, 31. You have to take 31 steps in order to reach the other end of the bridge. And now we can compare these different exploration strategies with just a simple Q-learning approach. So you can see in a deterministic setting, optimistic initialization is very good, right? It quickly explores the entire state space and finds the optimal solution. We can see that UCB over time, it does reach the optimal solution. What else? Epsilon greedy, as we expected, it doesn't perform very well, right? Just because of the very, very low probability of discovering the optimal solution. It will discover it eventually, right, at infinity, because there is some probability of discovering it, but for any amount of training, I can just make the bridge longer and it won't get there, okay? And the coin approach, the continual optimization approach, here, by the way, the addition step was just set every 1,000 episodes, just for a clearer presentation. But of course, it did converge. So you see the steps are in with set intervals. Okay, it's just for easier, so it would be easier to read. So this is actually not the appropriate step that we discussed previously, but I will show you some results with that later on. But you can see that the continual optimistic initialization is able to find the optimal solution fairly quickly. Not as fast as optimistic initialization, but fairly quickly compared to the other approaches. Now, of course, once we go to the stochastic domain, so in the stochastic domain, the agent tries to take a step to the right, I don't know, along the bridge, but there is some probability that it will fall down. So once we go into stochastic environments, the optimistic initialization does very poorly. While, as you can see, UCB performs a bit better. And still, our approach, the continual optimistic initialization, discovers the optimal goal much quicker. Okay. Now, actually, so our approach, you might say, well, it still is comparable with UCB, and UCB has some nice theoretical guarantees, so why should I still use it? Well, some settings where our approach can work much better even compared to UCB is for non-deterministic, non-stationary problems. So if things change over time, our exploration strategy can actually be very effective. So let's say that at some point, I think after 6,000 steps, the environment changes, and we have another goal location, right? As you can see here, the bridge changes that has higher reward. Okay, so exploring a non-stationary environment is actually even more complicated because many exploration strategies converge over time. And still, you can see that our continual optimistic initialization can very quickly discover this new goal that is more beneficial. So you can see here that it is outperforming even UCB and the other approaches. Okay, now for the question that was previously brought up. Well, you said, yeah, I'm better than UCB because I don't have to keep a table of values. But as someone here just said, well, you do have to, if you want to go and update your Q values, you have to keep a tabular Q setting. So in order to address that, that's also in the paper, going into non-tabular settings, we presented dual coin, where instead of updating the Q values, we update the reward function. We scale the reward, sorry, we don't scale the reward function. We do the addition, or in this case, it will be subtraction for the reward function, but we manipulate the reward function instead of the Q value. And then we prove in the paper that this actually has a similar outcome or a similar effect as updating the Q values. And this allows us, so updating the reward function can easily be done. It's not doesn't require a tabular setting. And so we say that dual coin makes coin practical. It's practical for continuous or large state spaces. So some results for that. Again, Q learning, deep Q learning with coin, and the different coin versus the different exploration strategies. And here the appropriate update rule was the one that we actually defined. And we can see that still exploring with coin can outperform other exploration strategies, for instance, in the lunar lander domain, and also in a very sparse reward domain, which would be the mountain cart, right? And still is able to perform better than the other approaches, right? So coin would be, deep Q learning with coin would be the black curve. And of course, higher is better in this case. Okay, so some takeaways. Coin performs continual optimistic initialization of Q values. It possesses unique set of properties, which is it's infinite often, provides infinite often visitation, curiosity, and there's no need for visitation tracking, specifically in the dual coin case. It's effective in long horizon stochastic environments. The dual coin can scale beyond tabular setting, and it provides some promising empirical evaluation results. Moving on to domains where sparse reward domains, but where we have some kind of guiding, even if it's suboptimal, but some kind of guiding demonstration or guiding demonstrator. Yeah.
About your results before.
Yes.
I'm curious, this one, the lunar lander. I'm curious, why is optimistic initialization so bad?
Because it doesn't explore. It quickly collapses to not explore. It quickly collapses to just being DQN without exploration, right? It starts with some Q values, but quickly becomes just regular DQN. And also, once you update some Q values downwards, because of the approximation, it tends to pull everything downwards. Also state and actions that you didn't visit before.
But isn't going to suffer from a similar problem?
No, we update the reward function, right?
Oh, so you're not updating the reward function for the optimistic initialization?
No, that's our technique, right? So instead of updating Q values, we do reward, reward scaling down.
I'm sorry, this one thing has dense reward or sparse?
Sparse reward in this setting. Only once you reach the end, then you see the reward. Or sorry, you get a -1 until you finish the.
Yeah, but if the reward is the same for all the states, does it make any difference to just taking a B from it? I mean, it's like you can the same amount for all state and action.
Right.
How does it differ from the main problem? I mean, you're just stop correcting B from the reward function for all state action.
Yes, but the immediate reward, the reward function shouldn't be confused with Q values. So Q values, I didn't define, actually, it's my fault, I didn't define it. Q values, the expected return, it's not the expected immediate return, it's the expected sum of return from being in a specific state and taking a specific action. So different states might have the same immediate reward, but they might have very different Q values. How close they are to the goal. Q values looks a bit into the future, if that makes sense. If not, never mind, maybe.
You're not globally subtracting B from the reward, right? As
globally from the reward function, from the immediate reward. Sorry?
So every time that you visit this state, you subtract the reward, right? That's why Q value is not affected.
The Q value is not immediately affected. It is affected over visitations. Okay. So no, I understand why it's not intuitive. You might want to look at. So we added a proof for why these are equivalent over time. Okay. So you know what? I won't have a lot of time to go into the specific solution here. I'll just give you the motivation, and then we can have some discussion, at least regarding coin, I guess. So in many cases, curious exploration is not enough, right? They do tend to improve the state action space coverage in a state and action space, as we just saw. There are several such approaches, such as coin, I just discussed it, R&D, and go explore, previous papers. However, in some domains, specifically in those very large domains with continuous actions and continuous state spaces, once you scale up and you have really sparse reward, so we had a unique domain where we played capture the flag, and only once you capture the flag of your enemy do you see any reward. So we were the blue tank, and we had to get to the red base, steal the flag without getting shot, bring the flag back without getting shot into the blue base. You can see how you can explore forever and not see that, especially as we make the map bigger and bigger. So at some point, you don't want to do, so these exploration strategies do provide you with effective coverage, but for big spaces, effective coverage is intractable. You don't even want to visit the entire state space, and that's why we looked at some solutions that involves imitation learning or learning from the red agent, for instance, learning from your enemy, and then improving and trying to outperform the enemy. So let me just, so let me quickly maybe just go over the results. Okay, you know what, we can just skip that. I don't know, Nathan, what do you suggest? We'll just have a discussion or?
Give us a little bit of what you're doing.
A little bit, okay. a little bit. So, so first of all, we just try to do imitation learning. Let's say I learn from the enemy, just perform the same. So there are very effective imitation learning techniques. However, for many of those, the main issue is you won't be able to outperform the enemy, right? So we'll be able to be on par with a red tank, but we would like to be better than a red tank eventually, right? So we also looked at what's called the curriculum learning approaches, where we try to break the very complex tasks into smaller tasks, like trying to fire at the enemy, steal the flag, evade being fired by the enemy, carry the flag to base, and so on. But we got lost in just defining the subtasks. So these, an effective curriculum there are some approaches that automate that, but usually they require demonstrations. I won't go into that. But for the basic idea of curriculum learning, we are required to decompose, or we need an expert, a domain expert, to tell us what are the interesting subtasks that we need to learn in order to perform the full task. So what we try to do is to do some imitation learning to warm start our agent and then to do reinforcement learning. Usually that doesn't work if you do a hard change. You do imitation learning, stop it, and do reinforcement learning. Usually what you see is collapse in performance and then relearning from scratch. So a hard transition is not advisable. So instead we did a curriculum or task phasing. We defined the curriculum continuum, and then we did gradual phasing. We can do this either with temporal, with changing the control, or learning a reward function, for instance, a dense reward function, for instance, with inverse reinforcement learning, and then shifting out the reward function. This has some nice theoretical guarantees, specifically if you use trust region-based RL. I won't go into that. And that actually provides us with very good performance, and we were able to outperform some state-of-the-art solutions. Let me just show you a video of our tank learning over time. So at the beginning, it was not very good. It's mostly lost to the red. The red agent is a rule-based agent. Okay, after a while, the imitation learning kicked in, so we were able to be on par with the red agent. And once the RL kicks in, we'll start performing better. The blue tank will start performing better than the red one. Regarding why this domain, you can speak with me offline. I'll tell you an interesting story here. This work with Peter Stone, he wasn't happy with the domain, but I told him. Anyway, it's a whole story.
You say they're shooting paintballs, it's fine.
This is under submission, so we actually get better results if we don't phase the reward function, but we can do some manipulation specifically on the gradient of the IL and the RL. We do what's called gradient manipulation and some gradient manipulation and loss manipulation. We get even better results, but this is not published again yet, so maybe next time I visit, I'll give you the full details here. This is also actually with Peter. Okay, so I'll stop here. So we have another idea. You know what? I'll just show you the movie here. This is for minimizing. This is also learning from demonstration. How do I mute this? Oh, right. Okay, so the idea here is where we still have a demonstrator, but it's this basic demonstrator. We wanted to learn from it, but we want to provide some guarantees that we don't perform worse than the demonstrator. This is something called baseline regret. So we don't want to perform worse than the baseline while learning. And it's also the task phasing idea, but we added some tricks. Okay, I'll just show you the video without explaining the details. So for instance, in Lunar Lander, we try to learn without ever crashing the lander, and getting better and better over time. Okay, so we do crash sometimes, but you can see that we crash far less than learning from scratch, and over time we do get better and better. We reach the same asymptotic performance. Okay, so you see from the onset we can provide some walking without falling down for robotics domain. And eventually, we will converge on the optimal performance with crashing significantly less times. Okay, so I'll let it run in the background, and we'll finish here. I don't know if you have time. I'm happy to discuss, by the way, offline. I have a whole day of parking, so I'm happy to stay, yeah.
So if you're focused on sparse-reward tasks, how important is it when you've got a human who's not very good, how important is it finding that sparse reward versus having some kind of trajectory to get you to the sparse reward? Like, so if you're just looking for that goal state, could it be a really crappy trajectory and that doesn't really hurt you that much as long as you find the goal state?
So you're asking about local optimum policy, I'm thinking, versus the global optimum, and how close they are in some essence. So if they are very close, obviously, specifically a TRPO, a trust region-based approach, I can quickly find it. If they are far away from each other, well, at some point, we'll get what's called negative transfer. It won't help me. I'll have to unlearn what they showed me and then relearn from scratch. There is a trade-off there, right? And the question is what guarantees you're looking for. There are ways around it, but again, we're going into, so you can go around it with high max-ent objectives. But I won't go into that, actually. We're just writing it, so Yeah. Writing it up. Any other? Okay. Any other questions? Anyone wants to have lunch with me? Okay.
We can wrap it up there.
Okay. Thank you.